So I'm going to, most of the agenda today, as we talked about over the past couple of weeks, is going to be dedicated to the bridge housing presentation. And I just want to remind everyone, this is specifically, I've asked Sylvia to just present on what bridge housing is and isn't, the ultimate goals of bridge housing. This call has nothing to do, we don't have any new information about what the county is or is not doing. So this is primarily just for us all to understand what bridge housing is, how it's different from permanent or other transitional housing models or emergency shelter. What are we trying to accomplish here? So I want to give most of the time to Sylvia. I want to cover one thing really quickly. We have a meeting with multiple partners on Thursday afternoon with some of the meal sharing providers connected to the Wednesday night Pershing Park Plaza Del Mar meal sharing. Focus of the conversation is, would these partners be willing to move that meal sharing over to the community lot potential navigation center Tuesdays from 10 to 1. So I'll be able to report back next week after that conversation. We'll follow up next week as well with how we're progressing with the city around a replication of that model. Next week as well, we're going to have the library is going to be on the call talking about their reopening process and some of their needs, as they're kind of the de facto day center for us in many ways for the city. So just to get that out of the way, the call is being recorded, so we will be able to send the link out to you after the meeting so you can share it with anyone else you think should have this information. I want to thank Sylvia. I've had the privilege of working with Sylvia for she's been working at this far longer than I have, but for the past decade, we've kind of been working together in various ways. I've been in Santa Maria and Lompoc working alongside her in different times. We worked together on the first vulnerability index, getting it connected to the point in time count. If there's anyone who understands just about everything around homelessness, from how to help individuals and families and put into practice those things, it's Sylvia. So I really appreciate you. I don't know, is Kirsten on the call as well? Or is it just going to be you, Sylvia?
I don't see her yet. I can instant message her real quick. I'll be doing the presentation, but if anyone has questions about our Isla Vista project, she would have the answers. So let me just instant message her to make sure she joins.
Okay. Well, Sylvia's the executive director of Good Samaritan Shelter. So thank you, Sylvia. I'm going to hand it over to you. And then I think Landon, you have the PowerPoint. So thank you, Sylvia.
I do, and it looks like Kirsten just joined the call.
Oh, perfect.
Okay.
So for those of you that don't know a little bit about Good Sam and the services that we provide, Good Samaritan Shelter is the largest shelter provider here in Santa Barbara County. So we have, between our residential treatment beds and our homeless shelter beds, we have a total of 500 beds under roof. And so we first started in Santa Maria and then took over the shelter system in Lompoc about 10 years ago. And then we have expanded services to South County as well. We're also the largest drug and alcohol treatment provider in Santa Barbara County, funded by Behavior Wellness. So we have 4 residential treatment programs, and we also have 5 outpatient clinics. So Good Samaritan's approach is really more of a holistic approach. I've been at Good Sam for 24 years. But we realized early on in the early stages that that homelessness was not just about getting food on the table and a roof over their head. That individuals that were experiencing homeless and families had a lot of other needs as well as just food and shelter. So we expanded to be able to provide mental health services. We have therapists on site. We have drug and alcohol clinics on site at our shelter campus. We have after school programming for homeless children. And the list goes on. We have medical clinics. We just added a sobering center. So thinking of Good Sam, I always kind of, fondly refer to it as kind of like our own little continuum of care. And so if someone comes in the door and they're pregnant and they have drug and alcohol issues, we can get them into residential treatment. If they come in and they have a mental health need, that we can connect them to our mental health services. And we do everything from warming center emergency shelter all the way through to permanent housing. And we do everything from sobering center residential treatment all the way through aftercare. And so we have kind of a big footprint, but just amazing staff, and really we would not be able to do it without our partners. And so Jeff and I met years ago, and we have always been, we're good partners, and I think we've learned a lot from each other. So that's been really great. Our model, and it's, it's not a secret. So our model, prior to Housing First becoming a mandate from the federal government, was traditionally housing ready. And our concept has always been that we want to make sure that homeless individuals and families are ready for housing so that they can be a good tenant, and that we would have happy landlords. And so the landlords could come back and we could house more individuals and families that need housing with them. And so we have adjusted to the Housing First model. We do have a program when they come into our shelter system that they need to abide by, just for safety issues and for us to make sure that everyone is going towards the right direction. So that's a little bit about Good Sam. I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. I want to just say that we were as surprised as probably all of you when you read the Independent that Good Sam was going to be providing a program in South County. I think we're all surprised because I didn't know about it, but I know that it's a concept that the county's trying to come up with. They're working with the city on it. We have not been officially chosen. We have not discussed the concept, but I know that there's a real interest in bridge housing, and Good Samaritan has 3 models, 3 programs that we run that are bridge housing. And so I had explained that to Jeff, and Jeff wanted me to come in and explain the difference between what bridge housing is for us and how we provide those services, and the difference between that and emergency shelter. There's a big difference between the two.
Sylvia, can you just pause before starting your presentation on Housing First? Because we've touched on it a few times, but we have a number of folks on this call that, again, are starting into the issue of homelessness or have been engaged for a while, but don't necessarily understand all of the terminology. But Housing First as a federal mandate is really important to make sure that people know what that means, and the solutions and the services that we provide as a result of that.
Yeah, so Housing First means that that you would accept an individual into a housing unit or into shelter, regardless of their situation. So whether they're under the influence, whether they have mental health issues, no matter what their income is, no matter what their disability is, that it's come as you are. And so the funding that has come down probably over the last 6 to 8 years, I'm not the HUD expert, but that has mandated that it be Housing First. And so if you receive federal funding or funding that requires that, then Housing First is a model. However, Housing First is to be accepted into a program, but once they get to a program, it is adjusting to, into the shelter, into the program, what that is. I don't think, we haven't seen any barriers to getting into housing or shelter. The biggest challenge really is substance abuse. Active substance abuse has shown to be the biggest issue in that transition from homelessness into housing, if there isn't support services that are connected to that, intensive support services. So I don't know if I got the definition right, but that's kind of the concept that we have an understanding for.
That was perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, good. So Landon, do you want to bring up the PowerPoint? So you can go to the next one. Landon's going to be my Vanna today. So if you go to the next slide. Are you able to move it, Landon?
Yes. Is it not moving on your screen? I have the one that says bridge housing at the top right now.
Yeah, it just wants you to go to the next slide, but I don't know how to do that.
I am clicking next slide. So do you want me to go to the next slide?
Yes, please. Sorry. I'll just say next slide.
No worries.
Sorry, we didn't rehearse this.
Keep going.
Yeah.
And Landon, can you make that the full presentation screen too, so it's clearer for us to read?
It should be, is it not?
I'm seeing the still
I
the
don't-
slides on the side.
Okay,
Yeah, and
let's,
I don't see it progressing to the next one.
yeah, so that might be why we're,
Yeah, there you go.
Oh.
Oh, that's back.
I'm gonna stop sharing and reshare.
Okay.
Thanks for your patience, everyone. Now, do you see the slides advancing?
I see the first one. Can you go to the next one?
Are they still not moving?
No, but when you clicked on the slide on the left-hand side, it went to it. Yeah, so maybe you want to do it that way.
Yeah, let's just do it this way.
Okay. So if you go back to the second one, and then, yeah. So Good Samaritan's mission is to provide emergency, transitional, and affordable housing with support services for the homeless and those in recovery throughout the Central Coast. So our vision is to celebrate and foster relationships that create wellness and wholeness in an environment of hope with every human being that we touch. We have worked really hard to focus on best practices, especially trauma-informed care. We were selected at one point to do a video that was shared nationally with other shelters and funded by SAMHSA on our best practices that focuses on trauma-informed care. You know, the one thing whenever I talk about someone who, when I reference that, you know, the population that we serve, which is homeless and or those in recovery or seeking recovery, is that, you know, they're somebody's someone. So to think about, you know, there's somebody's daughter, there's somebody's cousin, there's somebody's sister, there's somebody's mom, and to think about it from that perspective and know that, you know, they have something that's happened to them that's gotten them to this point and they're self-medicating. And how do we, as a community and as providers, you know, wrap ourselves around them and engage them in services and treatment so that they have the best shot and their family has the best chance of getting them back to where they need to be. And so that's kind of the approach that Good Samaritan takes, knowing that they are somebody, and we want them to get back to where they were, and we want to do whatever we can to support that. So you can go to the next one. So, so we have a lot of treatment services. As I had mentioned, we provide everything, including case management, housing, counseling, education. We provide childcare while they're in treatment. We give them safe coping skills. And so one of the things that we've done, and I'm going to kind of go a little bit off the slides for a second, is that when you think about homeless services and you think about a continuum of care, right? Like someone's, you know, on the streets, they're connected to an emergency shelter, they may get to transitional housing, or they may go straight to permanent housing from any of those venues. There's also a continuum of care on the substance abuse side. And so for the substance abuse side, we've always provided residential treatment and outpatient treatment, and then all the way to aftercare. But one of the biggest missing pieces that we've had in our continuum in both Santa Barbara and in Santa Barbara County has been a sobering center. And I have to say that the 24 years that I have been at Good Samaritan, I am baffled that we've never had a sobering center until now. And the sobering center is really an amazing program. There's one in Santa Barbara. We have 10 beds down there. We're operating at 6 right now under COVID. We just opened a 6-bed facility in Santa Maria as well. And that program allows outreach workers, providers, partner agencies, law enforcement, hospitals, and the like to be able to drop somebody off as a deterrent to jail, or they have someone that just needs a safe place to serve. We've also worked in partnership with housing providers. So if they have someone who down south that's active in their addiction and they need a safe place to be able to sober up, we have that programming within the sobering center with medical staffing in conjunction with sober staff. And then we also then connect them to treatment and or shelter. And so we can get them off the streets or back to a stable environment from us as well. And so that has been a piece that's been missing that was created right before COVID for Santa Barbara County and Santa Barbara from the County of Santa Barbara in partnership with Good Sam. And we just opened it up in North County, but that allows a safe safe landing place for individuals that are active in their addiction, that really should not be on the streets or out in the community, that just need a safe place to go to and then connect to services. Next slide. So the treatment services that we provide, I've mentioned it before, is the Stabilization Center, which is down in Santa Barbara. The new one in Santa Maria focuses only on homeless. We know from the one in Santa Barbara that is open to all populations that close to 70% of the clients that we serve there over the last year have been homeless. We collect a lot of data, and that was surprising, but I'm not sure why it was so surprising to me. And so that's why we opened one for homeless individuals in North County. We also have 4 residential treatment programs, and we have 5 outpatient programs that I had mentioned prior. Next slide. So the definition of bridge housing is it's a model of temporary housing that has service-enriched programs aimed to quickly bring homeless individuals off the streets and help them rebuild their lives as they transition to permanent housing. So Good Samaritan has 3 programs as such. We have the Life House, which is a 6-bed home up in North County in partnership with Behavioral Wellness. It's the AB 1810 house. We also have a community corrections program that is funded by the county in partnership with probation and housing community development. And then we also have this step-down housing in Santa Barbara that is in partnership with public defender and behavioral wellness as well. So the difference between bridge housing, so this is the Sylvia version, so bear with me, but the difference between bridge housing and emergency shelter is that emergency shelter serves the purpose of individuals seeking emergency shelter immediately. So for example, our shelter systems have, you know, I'm talking about pre-COVID, but we have like a clock in time, right? So you can sign in, you can try and check in at 4 o'clock. That's when you can come in for an intake, and we'll take you straight then. Bridge housing doesn't work that way. Bridge housing is a very specific referred program. So for example, an individual that may be on the streets or within the shelter system may be identified that they would be a good candidate for bridge housing. And bridge housing works as a referral system from the agencies that are partnering on it. And then what happens is the individual is referred in, and then they're stabilized through the process, and they receive intensive support services to support them as they are getting ready to move into permanent housing. So for example, at our at step down housing, individuals are referred with the public defender in partnership with behavioral wellness. The individuals coming to step down housing have to have received residential treatment prior to coming in. Most are released to us after 90 days of treatment. So they're individuals that are still identified as chronically homeless, but they've engaged in serious intensive services for 90 days. And then they move into a program where they have a full-time case manager. We have live-in house managers in those programs. So there's 24-hour staffing, but they receive all the intensive services that they need. And then we also provide transportation to all their appointments as needed. So for medical, any behavioral health appointments, and then we also connect them to streamline benefits. And then we also help them get a job, help them get document ready for housing, and make sure that they're getting all the services that they need. If they need to be stabilized on medication, we support that. And we work in partnership with our partner agencies to make that happen. So the next slide. So as I mentioned, Life House is a 6-bed house. It is for justice involved males. It's a male house. They are referred by district attorney and behavioral wellness, and then it's through the AB 1810 program. And then they receive case management and then also transportation. We also have behavioral wellness comes on site at that program and provides services on site through their case management program. And then we connect them to make sure that they're going to both substance abuse and mental health services and treatment, and we are the connector for that. The next one is our CCP program. So the CCP program are individuals that are on probation that have been referred by probation that really need the stabilization of a very structured program before they transition to permanent housing. So they are identified as homeless. They are referred only by probation. and they reside in a house. Every house has a house manager. It also has a full-time case manager that's assigned to the population under that contract. And then we also provide transportation to all the different services and programs that they need. And we work closely with probation to make sure that they are, that they are staying within their service plan, and that we're hoping that the goal is they would come off of probation and they would remain successful, and that many of them are seeking employment and getting employed during that time period, and then move on to permanent housing from there. The last program is step down housing. And I have mentioned that before, but basically these are individuals that are homeless, are identified as homeless. They do have possible criminal justice issues going on, but they are identified by the public defender and behavioral wellness as individuals that could really benefit from a structured program once they complete a higher level of care, which is residential treatment. So all the individuals coming in finish, most of them are 90-day residential treatment programs. From a structured program, they step down to our program. And then we have 24-hour staffing with live-in house managers, one in each house. And then we also provide 2 case managers there. One is a behavioral health case manager, and the other one focuses on their housing and their life skills. Bridge housing is also a program that is selected by the individual. So it's not like they're referred there because there's no other option for them. It's kind of a team approach, and the individual who is referred would be willing and wanting to, and understands what the rules are. There are rules in bridge housing. There's accountability in that program. They have to be willing to engage in services and case management, and they have to work with their case managers on an individualized service plan. And there's usually a multidisciplinary team approach, which would include, for example, behavioral health, the Be Well staff. It would include our staff. It would include also possibly like the public defender if they were involved, or probation. So it's not like individuals just come to the program and they show up and they're there. They're really referred to the program. They have to meet the criteria. They have to agree that they're going to continue to be engaged. And the ultimate goal is that they would go to permanent housing, and then that would be their long-term destination. So, so the next slide. So in the step down housing program, they can stay there for 6 to 12 months. To answer Chuck's question, on CES, it is considered emergency shelter because it's under that time period. But it could also be considered transitional housing. It just depends. I think that bridge housing, because they can come so quickly from homelessness and to be able to keep their status emergency shelter, is what we've determined those programs to continue to be allocated as such on the CES list. We have 2 male homes. We have 2 female homes. That's actually changing to 3 male homes and 1 female home based on our referral systems right now. We provide all the food, we provide all the services, the transportation, and the linkages and the partnerships with our other agencies that come on board. Case management connects them through the access line for mental health and drug and alcohol. We also connect them with medical care. We make sure that they have a provider. Many of them don't have a provider. Individuals come to us and they don't have an identification, and it just makes a lot of work to be able to pull all their documents.
Yeah, that was a long tour.
So Landon is so good at putting people on mute. That's so good. And so basically the case management just really coordinates all the resources and all the services and links them together. And then we also provide the transportation. We also make sure that clients are in the HMIS system, which is the Homeless Management Information System. And they also have a VI SPDAT completed, so that they usually come to us already in the system, but ensuring that they are enrolled in our program and that they're identified as where they're located at. And then we also work with housing providers. And we also have funding for we have funding from Santa Barbara County Housing Community Development. We have a lot of rapid rehousing funding. So when we partner with housing providers, we also have a landlord liaison position right now as well. Then we coordinate and work with the housing providers, and we can actually pay their rapid rehousing deposit, so their deposits to move in, and assist with some rent from there on. But we can also provide case management up to a year, which is really critical for this population to continue to, you know, focus on keeping them stable and permanent housing once they move on. The next slide.
I believe that's the last slide.
Oh, perfect. So, so Jeff, do you want to facilitate the questions, or should I just open them up?
I can do it. There's a couple of questions. There's another one from Chuck. If clients have to agree to programs and commit to sobriety, how do you still consider this housing first?
So housing first is when they come into the program. And, you know, anyway, so housing first is when they come into the program. It also depends if it's federally funded. So if you are in a facility that is federally funded, the housing authorities on here, they would know better than me, but I believe that there's no tolerance for having any drugs and alcohol in sight. So, so that's an issue. You know, we know that relapse is part of recovery, and we always work with individuals that relapse. And, you know, we're going to pick our battles. If there's an individual that relapsed and he drank alcohol, but he didn't, you know, go back to methamphetamine, that's a win. That's a big win for us. And so we just meet them where they're at, and we focus on that. So housing first is coming into the program, and you will take them however they are coming into the program. But the goal would be is to really focus on their root causes of homelessness to be able to support them in being successful in housing. That's the ultimate goal.
So I put the next question in about how do you currently work with local neighborhoods around your current bridge housing? Kind of what challenges have you faced? And if issues come up with neighborhood partners, how do you work to resolve them?
You know, for the most part, we haven't had any issues with our neighbors. In our CCP programs, our 80-year-old neighbor likes to mow the lawn, even though we have 6 able-bodied individuals that can do it. So we keep telling him, you don't have to mow our lawn. We also haven't had really any issues at all in our other CCP program in Tanglewood. You know, the biggest thing is that we want to be the best neighbor that we can be. That's really what the biggest issue is. And so it's making sure to communicate with the neighbors. It's making sure to let them know who we are, being transparent. We did have, you know, some pushback. We opened a house in Orchid probably about 5 years ago. It's called the Freedom House, and it was for homeless veterans. And there was a neighbor that was not very happy about it, and she created a lot of hoopla over that, I guess I could say. And, you know, what we did is we just, you know, I went ahead and staged a meet and greet, and I had invited all the neighbors to come in and talk to us about what we were going to do, and explain that there is a program, there are curfews, these are individuals that were veterans that served our country that came back to their own community, and they have a right to be able to, you know, be housed there. And I think that addressing the neighbors in that way is helpful, and for them to understand that bridge housing is a structured program. It's not an emergency shelter. It's not a day center. It's really a program that has goals. It has, you know, structure, and it has a lot of partners and enough staffing to be able to make sure that, you know, everyone is successful and that we are good neighbors.
Great. There's a question, what happens when someone does not follow the rules in bridge housing? And are the individuals, I think you've kind of answered this already, but are the individuals substance free in bridge housing?
So in bridge housing, we do drug test in bridge housing so that we are aware of individuals if they're using or not. We don't kick them out. I mean, the goal is that there's enough resources in Santa Barbara County that they can access resources so they're not kicked out and we can hold their bed. For example, there's the sobering center, there's residential treatment. And we've been known to utilize those so that we can not put someone back on the streets, but really try and address, you know, their need it would be a dream if every client came through and stayed clean and sober from day one and moved on to housing, but that's just not the population that we serve. And so our goal is really to wrap them around with all the support services and tools they need so that they have access for that. But there's another part of the question I think I missed.
I think you got it. If they don't follow the rules, or are they substance free? I think.
Oh, so, you know, we do have rules that they need to follow. I mean, we do have a process. Kirsten is actually on the call, so she might want to answer that question on how we're doing it. For example, at Isla Vista, we are running the Isla Vista pallet shelters program, but we do have rules within our program. So she might want to talk about that briefly.
So our goal is always not to exit a client. We do everything we can, but it's not a perfect world. And sometimes the program's not a good fit for everyone. And we do have to exit somebody. We give program warnings. We give usually 3 program warnings and a final program warning before a client is exited. And when we do have to exit them based on behavior or not being able to follow the rules, we always try to refer them to another agency, try to do a warm handoff, or just give them other options for sheltering. The program's not always a one size fit all for everyone. So there are those that won't be successful, but we really try through like strength-based case management and trauma-informed care to work through problems before it ends in an exit.
Thanks, Kirsten. The next question is the specific community bridge house to relocate individuals in the area of that house? Example, if it's somebody from the West Beach, if it's on the West Beach, is it open to people on the West Beach? How are people referred into a bridge housing program? Is it through coordinated entry?
So that's not been the case to date in our other programs. Our other programs have worked, and I don't know how this program is going to work, but our other programs have been driven by the funder. So for example, if the funder is probation, then they would identify regional clients that are from North County, either Lompoc or Santa Maria, and what would be the best fit to keep them in their own community, which would be the same concept of keeping them in their own neighborhood. So, you know, but that's to be determined, and I don't know how the city or county is going to set that up and how that would work.
Yeah, that's a to be determined based on the funding stream, but that could be a question for later.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think you answered this as well, but curfews, specific curfews and limitations. Oh, limitations on guests and people hanging around the property.
So bridge housing does not allow guests. So there's no guests that get to come visit at bridge housing. Bridge housing is only for the individuals that reside there, and there are no guests. The only guests that would show up would be partner agencies, like perhaps their mental health case manager from the county would come, or a public health nurse would come to visit. But there's no visitors at bridge housing.
The last question I have, and there might be, okay, there's a couple more questions. In order to satisfy all interested parties, is there any consideration to not place bridge housing in high tourism areas in the event there does not become a problem house? And maybe I can answer this a little bit as well, or maybe Barbara, this is where you want to step in and talk about how we're trying to have a balanced approach across the city, not to put to have each part of the city kind of have its own solution based on to support those experiencing homelessness. So I've had this conversation with some other folks from the waterfront regarding, is it a smart place to put potentially bridge housing in the middle of a tourism area? And I think that question comes around, do we see this as an asset or a deficit? And so what I'm hoping comes across from this call is that bridge housing is actually an asset to the community, not a deficit, especially run by partners who have successfully run programs like this. And I know that Good Sam has actively worked with all of its partners, whether that be a bridge housing, or their shelter. They always work really closely with their neighborhoods to make sure impacts aren't high. But Barbara, do you want to talk briefly about how this kind of bridge housing fits into our 3-year strategic plan already? and how this also ties to our work around both East Side State Street and waterfront in a balanced approach to where we might put some of these solutions.
I actually want to reframe the question, because this is really the heart, I think, of what
Yeah.
we're getting at. Addressing concerns of residents and business owners in the area, making sure that it's a location that is welcoming to tourists. If, again, a location is pursued on the waterfront or high tourist traffic area. The question really is, have you seen, Sylvia, in your experience, a problem bridge housing program that you haven't been able to manage any of the challenges at the property or in the surrounding neighborhood because of individuals that you've supported in that program? So I'm going to ask you a couple follow-up questions, but that's the first question.
Well, I just want to preface it by saying that we don't have a program in a high tourism area. I want to be honest about that.
Currently, right.
Right. So we don't. Do we have programs in tourist area? Absolutely, we do, but not in high tourism areas. I would say that, well, let me just, so I think that that's to be determined really by the entities that are going to make the project happen. I know that our ultimate goal is to make sure that bridge housing is not where individuals come and go and hang out outside all day. It doesn't work that way. Bridge housing, if you went by any of our programs, the 3 programs I listed, you wouldn't even know that it is bridge housing, but they're also more in like residential areas. But to be honest, our neighbors don't know that we're at 2 of them most of the time, because our clients don't hang out. They don't, smoke out front. They don't, basically they're really focused on their programming, and we try and bring the programs in so that they can receive those services. We, I do want to share, because we have a little bit of time, is that, and I'm sure some of you have heard this story, but, we have had NIMBY issues, no doubt, at Good Samaritan. And my first experience of really having a NIMBY issue was in Lompoc. And Lompoc, we had done some data analysis with the county and realized that 50% of our clients in our programs in Santa Maria were all from Lompoc, needing treatment in their own community. And so the opportunity came up. There was some funding from the state level and the county. And so we decided to buy the flower shop that had been there for a very long time. And we wanted to do a residential, well, it was basically, we wanted to do a detox and a residential program for women and children that were in need of treatment. And we had a 7-hour hearing, and there was over 100 people that showed up at that city council hearing. And it started at 6:30, and it was midnight. And there was the one side that was individuals that were concerned about a school around the corner. It was parents, and they were concerned, and a neighbor. And then there was really individuals that were, concerned, that had been through recovery or were supporting Good Samaritan. And there was a woman that had gotten up and said, I don't want your project across the street from my house. I don't want to be sitting on my porch and watching people, use drugs, and I don't want to do that. And there was a young man that got up, and I never met him before, and I never saw him afterward, but he got up in that moment, and he said he was like the 30th person in line. And he just said, I work at the hospital, and I want to make my apologies to this community for using in the community and dealing drugs in the community. But through Good Samaritan in Santa Maria, I was able to get clean and sober and out of homelessness. To the lady that says that, she doesn't want drugs in her neighborhood, actually used in your house with your son. And so before you start throwing stones, you probably need to look in your own home first. And it was dead silence. None of us knew what to say or do. And the mayor pulled it back and said, let's vote. And it was a 5-0 vote. But I think what's hard is that when there's homeless individuals that are in their addiction and in their mental health issues, and they're not getting the services that they need, that's the concept of what we think of bridge housing.
That was going to be my second question, and I don't mean to cut you off.
That's not. Once
but I
you
think
can
it's
get
so
in
important.
program,
It's
right.
so important to emphasize that the 120 individuals that we counted at the end of September that reside on the waterfront in terms of where they put their head at night and frequent that region are in that experience right now. and not able to access services, or haven't had the trusted relationship built to be able to feel comfortable accessing services. So that perception is what folks are experiencing right now, and it feels unsafe, it feels uncomfortable, it absolutely feels like a public safety issue to a lot of residents and business owners in the area, as well as some of the impacts that our businesses are dealing with defecation, property theft, and other violations. So that is the key point, is that those are individuals that are not getting supportive services right now. They're getting case management and outreach, they're having some relationship building, and they're in the system to be connected to services when they're available. But if those services are not available, then we won't have individuals getting treatment and very much able to change their behavior, who they are, get their life back, and be able to overcome their circumstances without that support. So how quickly have you seen shifts in individuals once they enter a bridge housing program from what they were experiencing living on the streets?
Well, the bridge housing programs that we have two models, but the most effective model is once they've gone through a program first. So for example, they're connected to residential treatment, or they're connected to mental health. They're already connected to the services that they need, and they're just bridging over to us to stabilize that situation, make sure that they get all their documents ready for housing. They can then get a job, they can do whatever they need to do to be successful and sustain housing and move on to permanent housing. So we're not it is a housing first model, but it's a referral system in to a very structured program, and the individuals have to be wanting it. It's not like, it's a shelter system where, you come in and, you can choose after you get here. You choose before you get here that this is the program that's going to be a fit for you, because that's what our goal is and we're focusing on.
Thank you so much for that. And this is the last comment to go back to why Jeff transitioned to me to begin with, because I'm trying to also answer questions in the chat while we're communicating out our broader plan and what our objectives are. So this bridge housing program and the proposals that could support that are being prioritized not only by the county, but the city's Act on Homelessness Collaborative 3-year strategic plan. So that is what SB Act is helping to facilitate. And that leadership team represents many diverse voices, diverse organizations, including residents and business owners as well. So we're prioritizing this for a number of reasons, because we consider it a gap in capacity, that we need more bridge housing program to ensure that individuals, once they're referred to permanent supportive housing, are successfully retained in that housing unit. So that's number one. The other piece is that given the limited availability of properties in Santa Barbara in general that are within a range of affordability for the county to purchase or another entity to purchase, we are committed to every neighborhood identifying 1 or 2 locations that can be used for housing solutions to address homelessness. We are at a position in terms of the number of individuals experiencing homelessness that we need every neighborhood, high tourist or not, to be part of the solution. So in regards to the type of solutions that are available, from emergency sheltering to affordable housing, the waterfront and bridge housing is ideal, because we don't want there to be a 100-bed emergency shelter on the waterfront. That would have different impacts than a bridge housing program proposal. Affordable housing, again, narrowing that window in terms of affordability, being able to build out. The cost of building out on the waterfront is very expensive. So looking at some of those options, I know the continuum of care at the county level has been going through a lot of vetting, looking at different criteria, starting with 7,000 potential locations according to zoning, but narrowing it down to 30, and then narrowing it down even further to a handful of locations. So when folks are saying why the waterfront for this, it actually is, of the solutions that every neighborhood needs to commit to, it is a better fit from our perspective, as well as the experience of our leadership team and service providers that have been like you, Sylvia, in this for decades. So it has been carefully considered, but we do obviously, in moving forward, again, not to address any specifics with a potential county proposal, because we do not have that information right now, that we want to be supportive of solutions that are better fitted for certain neighborhoods and address the concerns of residents and business owners as we're building out whatever housing solution would be placed at that location. So there's a couple of questions, Jeff. I want to turn it back to you, specific to the county that we can't address today, but any outstanding questions as we close out, please go forward. Any questions on our strategic plan and how we're facilitating that and what our goals are? I'm going to put my email address in the chat for people to contact me.
Yeah, thanks, Barbara and Sylvia. It's not as simple answering Debbie's question as a choice between a shelter and bridge housing. It's not like there's a team of people behind the scenes kind of pushing any kind of agenda. This was an opportunity that came before the county and they're looking at as far as bridge housing. And after talking with various waterfront partners and our team and Sylvia, this bridge housing model does seem to be the best fit when it comes to a housing solution for the waterfront. That's why we're having this educational kind of call to help you ask all your questions around this specific model. And again, we don't even know if anything is officially going to move forward. We're just trying to take this opportunity to educate all of you on what bridge housing is and what bridge housing isn't, should it become a bridge housing opportunity. So kind of that's the role of SB Act. We are trying to get the most accurate information to you when we receive it. All that information isn't decided yet, but we're given the okay to say, yes, the county is looking at this specific site for bridge housing. So we wanted to get in front with all of you and explain what bridge housing is. There are opportunities if you have concerns just about what the county is doing to speak before the Board of Supervisors or to speak directly with somebody like Kimberly Albers from the county about your concerns. Just to let you know, we're also wanting to let you understand where you can bring your concerns about this to the right place, which is not necessarily this call, if that makes sense. Sylvia, can you speak briefly, because you've been on the COs, you've been on the continuing care for a while, so you'll understand kind of why the county tries to figure out sites that they feel work for a specific solution and why they feel like this site might be workable for bridge housing. Would you have any understanding of that you could speak to?
I don't. I mean, I think that, you know, the county is always so creative in trying to find locations. And I know that the city is also working on some locations as well to see where they can put different shelter systems. We have actually played a part in the ones for North County. We're not involved in the ones in South County. We're willing to have the discussion about being a provider. But the one thing to understand is that bridge housing has really been a missing link on the continuum of care on the homeless side. Like what I referred to on the sobering center side, this is a huge missing link. Typically, housing first is that you take the person off the streets and you put them straight into permanent housing, and they go by vulnerability. So based on the assessment, the most vulnerable, the ones that need the most services, are the ones that are being put straight into housing, which are creating issues for housing providers because they're not prepared. They also emergency shelter, you know, the one thing that we know in Santa Barbara County is that it takes a long time to get to permanent housing. And so if you take an individual off the streets and you put them into shelter and you don't have the intensive services available to be able to provide for them, getting them straight into housing, they're not really prepared for that. And it creates an issue for a residential area or the housing that they go to. So the goal here is that we're going to take individuals that are homeless, take them that are willing to go into bridge housing, stabilize them for 6 to 12 months, and then be able to transition them into permanent housing. And especially, you know, I know everyone hates the term, but it is a housing ready model. And that's, you know, me and Jeff have had a love-hate relationship over that term, but it's really getting people ready for housing. We want them to be a good tenant. We want them to be able to be a good member of our community and productive member. And we can't do that when we just put them straight into housing without the resources that they need. I'm not going through all the questions. I was trying to do it while you're going. One question I think Liz had was, is this the largest largest property we've managed? By no means, no. So Bridge House in Lompoc has 90 beds. The shelter campus that Kirsten oversees in Santa Maria has a total of like 5 different programs with 250 beds at that one location, including permanent housing and emergency shelter. And we have other programs like 45 bed residential treatment programs that include the children. So we have very large programs that we've managed for years prior to here. We actually have 26 people living out at the Isla Vista Pallet Shelter program that we're running right now. And so we're we've managed very large programs as well as smaller programs as well. We kind of, there's a range there.
So Alexander has his hand up. Let's do this as the final question. This is obviously going to be an ongoing conversation as information comes forward. Alexander, did you have a question or a comment?
Hey guys, yeah, I don't know if I can share my screen. Can you guys see me okay?
Yeah.
Hey, so my name is Alex Argyropoulos. I was born and raised in Santa Barbara. I'm right here in Venice Beach where I live. This is our transitional house right here. I don't know if you can see that, but these are all homeless encampments that have popped up. And this is right in front of Google on Sunset, Maine and Hampton. 30 RVs. There are permanent. My property value has decreased tremendously. So I actually wanted to get out of Venice and move back to Santa Barbara. Here's some more homeless housing. I don't know if you can see this, all right in front of Gold's Gym, right in front of Google. They're talking to me. They're walking in the street. They do not care about moving into a house. They're just here because the homeless shelter is here. And it's actually, there's part of it's homeless shelter, part of it's transitional housing. I don't know if you guys are looking. If you can see this, it is really an issue. And this goes on for blocks and blocks. And I literally just bought 124 West Yananali, 1 block from the proposed site. And to get away from this, because I want to be able to and not worry about getting mugged. And now this is about 3 months after I closed. This shelter is being proposed in properties in the Funk Zone. We're in real estate in Santa Barbara. We own the building, the Lark, the Lucky Penny, the Hangar. We own the base building, and we have some properties on State Street. And I'm just here to tell you guys, this concept, this is not the place, and this will not work. And if the housing authority decides to go through with this location, I will really be upset, and it will drop. My property value will drop. I've seen it before. I've been living in it for the last 2 years since they put in this transitional housing. It's devastated the area. People are out here. It is horrible. And I'm also, guys, I don't talk about it often. I struggle with drug addiction. I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous since 2017. I am all for sobriety. I believe we need to help these people, but this does not work. There are RVs, there are vans everywhere. So if you guys want to come down and visit me here at Venice Beach, I will show you what will happen in Santa Barbara.
Let me wrap this up. Alexander, let me wrap this up, but if you'll contact me, I'll have a conversation directly with you. I think you're on the phone. I don't think you can see my email, but I'll try to figure out. I'm at jeff@sbac.org. I'll have an individual conversation with you about it. Thanks for calling in and sharing your concerns. I think that's important, and that's why we're having the calls. I think that some of the things that he mentioned on the call are not equal to what we're talking about, honestly, happening with this potential one bridge housing site. But Sylvia, do you have something to say regarding that last comment?
Well, yeah, if you go to any of our locations throughout the county, outside of Isla Vista that we don't have control of, the park next door, we don't have encampments next to us. We don't have, tents set up next to us for individuals that are camping out. That's not the population or how we serve. There was a question, someone had a question about, do we connect them back to their community they came from? Kirsten has a great example of an individual who came out of the encampment in Isla Vista, came to our pallet shelters. He was an older gentleman. He really wanted to move back to Yuma. We literally drove him back to Yuma. We paid for his housing. We moved him in. We set up the entire apartment, and he has enough income to continue his housing, and he is safe. And absolutely, if that is an option for them, we're all about figuring out how to help them relocate so that they can be stable and be closer to a support system that they deserve. And so, absolutely, that's always an option. And that's actually happened. It's interesting. When you look at individuals that are homeless that have come through our bridge housing programs, we've had, our goal is always to get them to permanent housing. In the one in Santa Barbara, we've actually had several individuals that reconnected with their families and moved in with like their aging mom to help them, because now, they had burned the bridge prior, but now through all the support services and being able to stabilize it, they were able to find housing within their own support system as well, and rebuild those connections. And that's really important to know as well.
And Sylvia, I just want to thank you too, because I think Jeff and I really appreciate that. A lot of the engagement that we've had from residents and business owners on the waterfront, as well as all of our collaborative partners, has been less about NIMBYism and more about, hey, we're supportive of all the solutions that need to be in play. And we absolutely want to help people exit homelessness and have those visible reductions in homelessness, especially on the waterfront and other neighborhoods. But is this proposal, is this location the best location to be able to provide that level of service? So I think we were able to answer some of those questions. Obviously, if it does move forward, we're going to be able to answer in a level of detail even further than today. But I appreciate that a lot of the comments have been, we agree that every solution needs to be on the table. How do we determine the best neighborhoods to be able to locate folks and make sure that we have those variety of solutions available to us? So I want to thank everyone that especially has been engaged in our regional action plans regularly for coming at it from that side. And again, as we move forward, we're going to be able to answer questions with more detail.
Thanks, Barbara. The RAP exists with a balanced approach. I mean, the whole call was started to hear the concerns of the community. That's why the RAP exists. Now we balance that with we want to hear your concerns and the impacts of your community, and we're responding. We're trying to respond. That's why we're trying to help with the meal sharing and moving that away from the waterfront. We're working with individual regions on some of the impacts to reduce them. More than willing to do that. But on the other side, we have discussed we're going to continue to bring forward solutions. And if we feel like they're effective solutions, our job is to try to push them through and answer any questions we can. Like I said, there are questions that we can't ask. I know Rob put his information as far as the Housing Authority. If you have any questions for them, you can contact him. You can contact the county regarding other questions you might have that need to be directed to the county, because we're not in control of the actual decision. But we want to make everything work. I was in my conversation this week with some people. It is the difficult position of trying to find these win-win-wins across the board. And that's why this call exists. So open communication is really important. Transparency is really important. Trying to answer questions is really important. So we're just at 4 o'clock. Please contact me if you have any other questions or concerns this week, because I'll figure out what should be on the agenda for next week. I want to thank you, Sylvia, for being on the call and for everything you do. And I hope everyone has a great rest of the week. And we're recording this so we can share this later. Thanks, everyone.